We know that Ethan and Skink have landed in the Raven Lands, but as we open issue 9, we learn that Ethan's siblings do not know this. They walk the Heron Gardens on a particularly lovely day. The sky is clear and blue, the plants are colorful and well kept. An actual heron, like the bird, hunts in an artificial pool. Prince Kai and Princess Elena are both well-dressed in fairly formal-looking attire. They are royalty, after all, and they discuss Ethan's current status. Kai thinks that Ethan has probably landed in the east, but he won't communicate with them for the duration of his time there. The Ravens are sure to be running communication sweeps, and he'll want to stay undetected. Elena thinks that Ethan is on this mission because of his guilt, which Kai confirms, in his point of view, is true. He speculates that Ethan probably thinks that he deserves any kind of pain or suffering that his mission will bring him. So let's say that Ethan does find Braun, Elena says. Can he actually beat him? Kai isn't sure. Braun is a fierce warrior for sure. They have a dead brother to prove it. But Ethan also has that sigil on his arm, whatever it is, and it gives him some kind of boost. Elena is afraid for Ethan. He might be a man now, but he'll also always be her little brother. She can't help but worry about him. Nestled under the shade of a nearby tree, Burned Rex says that he is worried too. The Herons are surprised to see him here. Rex replies that he's just finished a planning session with their father, and he fears that this war will drag on. He came here to clear his mind, but honestly, he also fears for Ethan's safety. He would be far more useful here than off on some vendetta on the other side of the world. Elena points out that Rex is very interested in Ethan, and more importantly, in his sigil. Given what happened to him the last time that he touched the sigil, Rex's interest is kind of surprising. The advisor smiles, but there is no warmth to it. He is actually hoping to investigate that particular phenomenon upon Ethan's return. Now he's taken enough of their time. Bowing, Rex excuses himself and leaves the two Heron siblings alone. Elena carefully watches him leave before she begins speaking. Then she leans over to Kai, but she keeps looking at Rex. Do you trust him? Kai carefully answers that their father seems to trust him, but Kai does not. Maybe he's honestly here to help with the war, but Kai doesn't like his focus on Ethan either. Maybe wherever Ethan is, he's actually better off than being here. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 18.6, Scion, Swords and Sigils. Most of this opening scene is Mars's good old writing style, recapping the basic series events so that we know where we are with everything. Ethan hurt Braun thanks to the sigil, Braun killed Artur, and Ethan has gone after Braun for revenge. We know that at this point. But new readers might not, so despite having that handy-dandy story thus far page, Mars still does it. This scene also helps to explore Kai and Elena a little bit more. This definitely isn't the scene to come back to when referencing their characters, but it does do some important work. We're shown that both of the siblings are worried for Ethan, but that Elena, who is younger than Kai but older than Ethan, defers to Kai. She asks his opinion of Ethan's motivations. She asks his opinion of Braun's martial skills, and she asks his opinion of Burned Rex. Elena also comes off as a bit more daring than her brother. Sure, Kai might be willing to press a knife to Rex's throat, but Elena is the one who calls him out on his interest in Ethan and his sigil. And she is the first of the two to bring up a general distrust of Rex. Kai is very careful with his answers. He knows that as a member of the royal family and new heir to the throne, his words can be a weapon, and he's clearly willing to use weapons. But when Elena brings up her suspicions about Rex, Kai makes sure to mention that he has their father's favor, even if he doesn't trust him. Kai knows that Rex is suspicious, but they can't run around with baseless accusations either. Kai shows the same level of insight in his read of Ethan. He knows that Ethan is motivated by guilt, and he guesses that Ethan is also on this quest to punish himself. Yes, his spoken motivation is to kill Braun, but any pain and suffering that he goes through, Ethan thinks he deserves it, because Arthur's death was his fault. For a scene that's like 5 pages, which includes a full-page image of a heron, Mars does a lot of character work. Of course, we also have Rex, who I gotta bring up, cause he's such a floopin' creep! Mars and Cheung go out of their way to make Rex seem sinister, from hanging back in the shadows to being fascinated by Ethan. After Elena brings up the reaction that the sigil had to Rex in issue 7, there's one shot of Rex smiling, and his face is shadowed, and his smile is predatory. He looks super suspicious. And of course, we have the Heron kids stating their suspicions, so this enhances our distrust of Rex. But why would we have to be suspicious of Rex? Guess we'll find out. In the east, we find Ethan and Skink approaching a small town set in the rolling hills at the base of a mountain. It's a cute collection of town buildings set next to a river. A small curved stone bridge leads into town, where a stone memorial sits at the edge of the town limits. People mill about, but there seems to be a crowd gathering just behind one of the buildings. Ethan pauses on the far side of the bridge, making sure to cover the heron symbol-bearing pin that holds his cloak. And hold the floopin' phone! I ain't had a real rant about this book, and it's because I love it, and it's solidly put together, so there really isn't much for me to cry about. But Ethan is a heron prince, who wounded the Raven Prince in a scandal so large that it has brought 2 countries to war. And the ravens clearly have a color scheme of red and black going on, while the herons are blue and white. These are clear costume choices that make it easier for the audience to tell who is on what side. But Ethan is behind enemy lines, and is an enemy of the state, and he stays in his heron clothing. And he wears his heron pin proudly. The thing is like the size of his palm. It's metal. It's flooping noticeable, and you're trying to sneak around while in public wearing it? What the hell are you doing, man? This is so stupid. And it hurts even more because this book has been so generally good up to this point. So having masterfully disguised himself by throwing his cloak over the pin and pulling his hood up, Skink adjusts the pack on his back, and Ethan heads into town. Ethan just wants to get in and out real quick. They can't risk being caught, and he just wants to find Ashley. If you think that's still the best course of action, Skink says. Ethan then explains his rationale, and it's less to Skink and more to us, the audience. Ashley's friends helped him get out of the Raven Keep once before. Hopefully this time, they can help him get back in, and then he can find Braun and, Skink eyes his companion. Is that the only reason that you want to find Ashley? Glaring at Skink, Ethan assures him that that is the only reason. As they reach the center of town, we find the large crowd gathered around a freshly constructed stage. Raven soldiers armed with spears stand next to a desk that is in its center. Draped over the desk and decorating the stage is Raven military gear. The army is recruiting for the war effort, so our boys best avoid this scene. Before they can leave, Skink touches Ethan's arm and points at the dais. This is honestly the most emotion that Skink has shown this whole book. There! Behind the recruiter! Ethan looks, and there stands Exeter. Sure enough, it's him, the large bounty hunter glaring out from beneath the cloth roof. Ethan is honestly surprised to see him, blurting out that he killed him. Skink reminds Ethan to keep quiet, yo. He is obviously alive. Skink guesses that he's probably here to keep any bounties from trying to escape by joining the military. He can't be looking for them. He couldn't even know that Ethan is in the Raven Lands. They should be fine, if they can go unnoticed. Ethan gathers himself. Skink is right. In any case, they need to move. While everyone else is busy with this spectacle, they can get what they came here for. Our boys sneak off and find a wooden barn. As they head inside, Ethan says that he isn't a fan of stealing horses. He remembers this one time when his dad caught him stealing pastries from the servant's larder. He was scrubbing kitchen pots for a month. Skink says that they don't really have a choice though, and Ethan agrees. But just because they need to do this, that doesn't make it right, and it certainly doesn't make him comfortable with it. Let's just get the horses and go. He walks over to a mechanical lock on a stable door and presses a button. Movement behind him suddenly catches Ethan's attention. He turns to look just in time as Exeter bursts through the wall, his axe is in hand and swinging. "I have never lost a bounty, princeling," he shouts, striking at Ethan. Our hero manages to deflect a series of blows, but he is left reeling by this attack. He put a sword through Exeter's chest. How is he still alive? Exeter bunches up like a cat. "I told you, I'm much harder to kill than that." He springs forward again, impacting on Ethan's sword once, twice, and on the third strike, Ethan's sword shatters. Uh-oh. The camera swings over to Skink, who doesn't look nervous about this new development at all. In fact, he looks like he's focused more than anything. Quietly, he whispers to himself, "Now is the time." An axe swing just misses Ethan as he dodges, chopping the stable lock. Some kind of lizard monster farm animal smashes through the door, spooked by all of this violence, and it knocks Exeter back. Given a moment to breathe, Ethan's hand searches the floor for some kind of weapon, any kind of weapon. And suddenly, his sigil crackles with energy. The sleeve covering Ethan's right arm suddenly tears and bursts open, revealing his bare arm. Golden yellow energy flows down his arm, and it gathers in Ethan's hand, forming an energy facsimile of his blade. Ethan is surprised. Exeter is totally off guard. And Skink just smiles. Ethan says that he doesn't know where this came from, but he knows what to do with it. Ethan turns and charges at Exeter. The bounty hunter isn't just surprised by this, he is impressed. But he will have that bounty on Ethan's head. Ethan knocks Exeter back, though. The only one who'll be losing their head soon is Brawn. Then Ethan dashes in and, with 2 quick swipes of his sword, Ethan cuts the heads off of Exeter's axes. This doesn't stop Ethan, though. He charges in, battering Exeter around the barn. With one final blow, Ethan punches him through a wall. He approaches the bounty hunter, the blade held in 2 hands. "Last words?" he says, standing over Exeter's beaten form. Barely managing to hold up a hand, Exeter tells him to just end it. But Ethan doesn't kill him. Instead, he lowers his sword. This confuses Exeter. "What are you doing? Just use your magic sword to kill me." The sword and the glow from Ethan's arm fade away. "No," Ethan replies. "There's only one person that he aims to kill, and that's Brawn." He tells Exeter that he underestimated him once before because he was of the lesser races. That will not happen again. He then warns Exeter that this had better be the last time that they see each other. With that, Ethan turns and walks away. Cradling a wounded shoulder, Exeter looks at the floor. "Perhaps," he says. "Perhaps not." Skink has assembled the riding gear for 2 almost horse-like creatures, and he holds their reins as Ethan approaches. He says to Ethan, and I mean says, not asks, "You didn't kill him." Ethan confirms this, and Skink nods. Good. The sigil healed Ethan once before, he notes. It makes him stronger, faster, and now this? What can't it do? Skink dodges any kind of answer worth a damn. He has told Ethan before that the sigil can be a gift or a curse. It is up to Ethan to decide which one that it is. More than that, he doesn't know. Ethan takes the reins to his steed and climbs on board. Well, whatever it is, it sure has turned his life around. Worst of all, though, he isn't sure that it's done with him yet. The pair kick their horse-like animals into overdrive and take off To the north! 2 days of riding later, Ethan and Skink have arrived at the destination indicated by Ashley's jewel. This is the place, Ethan says, looking around. But it's nothing but ruins. And those ruins are exactly the same ruins that Braun hunted his escaped slave, Nock, to, back in issue 8. Ethan dismounts, figuring that he might as well look around. Skink warns him that something feels off here. Things are not as they appear. Intrigued by the ruins, Ethan ascends the stairs that Ashley once walked down only a few days ago. He reaches the top of the stairs and spins around, taking in the scene. The stairs are sturdy, and there is about 10 feet of platform that ends in crumbling stone. The wind whips Ethan's very dirty cloak, and he sighs. There's nothing here. Maybe there never was anything here. Ethan's body sways as he shifts his weight to start to head back to Skink, and when he does, half of his body disappears. Ethan leans back out of the effect. His limbs are all still there. They exist. It's some sort of cloaking field. Testing it with a hand first, Ethan then walks into this field of nothing, and into the underground.
Dramatic reverb.
Ethan is no longer out in the open. A large stone and wood building surrounds him, with wooden beams reaching up to the ceiling. A single electric light hangs from a chain that is suspended from the ceiling. Standing before Ethan are 7 warriors from the lesser races. They are all armed, and they are all fairly intimidating. There's a man-bat, a grasshopper-looking fellow, 2 men who resemble Nock but all swole up, a cheetah woman, some kind of furry dude it's hard to pin down, and a gray-skinned dude in the back. One of the buff dudes has an arrow knocked and trained on Ethan. "You found us," he says. "Now tell me why we shouldn't kill you." This issue is perhaps my favorite issue of Scion's first year. I mean, you've got Jim Cheung and the art team killing it. In general, we get Exeter back in action, we see Ethan use the sigil in a new, much more conscious way, and he manages to find the underground. There is so much happening in this issue, and it's all forward momentum, and I love it. Exeter's return to Scion is not a secret, by the way. I tried to keep quiet about it since you folks aren't looking at the comics while I am talking about them, so it is unlikely that you know where this story is going or what's going to happen, and I don't want to spoil anything before we get there. But Exeter actually appears on the cover for this issue, hiding under a bridge like a troll while Ethan and Skink pass overhead. So, thanks to CrossGen using the next issue's cover for promotional purposes, a reader of issue 8 would have seen that Exeter comes back at the end of last issue. Despite this basically being a spoiler for Exeter's return, it did the exact opposite for me as a reader. Ethan hasn't exactly faced a lot of villains up to this point in the series. We've basically had Prince Braun, Exeter, and some really nameless and faceless and less interesting bounty hunters so far. So Exeter made quite an impression. There is also the inherently interesting fact that Exeter is of the lesser races, but that he is also a bounty hunter. His bread and butter is hunting escaped slaves, his own people. Why does he do that? When did he start? What has Exeter's life been like? That is interesting stuff to explore, and I'm glad that CrossGen and Mars kept him around. The fight with Ethan is great. It's fast-paced, it's well choreographed, it all moves nicely. Exeter's opening assault is fast and hard. He learned his lesson from fighting Ethan last time, and he doesn't let up until he shatters Ethan's sword. That is good, subtle character growth, fitting in well with Exeter's missing time between issues. Ethan's sword shattering was something that I remember being totally flummoxed by when these books were coming out. Scion has made a big deal out of Ethan's sword up to this point, pointing out its beauty and its history. Hell, we just covered CrossGen Chronicles issue 2, which was fully dedicated to the sword's original wielder, Edvin. Mars even makes an additional point of having Kai give the sword to Ethan in issue 7, and Ethan says that he is going to use it to kill Braun. This sword has been promised destiny. And then it breaks. And now Ethan is defenseless, fighting a foe at least 3 times his body weight, with years of fighting experience, who is armed with 2 weapons, who also appears to be unstoppable, even by death. In his desperation, his sigil activates, and he creates the energy sword. It is important to note that the sigil also gives Ethan a general power boost. When he starts attacking Exeter, again, he is faster, able to dodge Exeter's swings with ease, and he gets inside of his reach to cut those axe heads off. He is stronger as well. Each sword stroke shoves Exeter back. Like I said, a single punch forces Exeter through a wall. Ethan barely stood his ground against the bounty hunter back in issue 3, but now he is more than Exeter's equal. He's his better. That is an incredible boost, and it does force us to ask the question, what else could the sigil do? It seems to respond to Ethan's need. He needed to heal back in issue 2, he needed a sword now, he needed to fight better, and it responded to that. But Ethan still hasn't really consciously made the sigil do much, leaving the depths of its powers unknown. We do see Ethan dismiss the sword, and as we move forward into the next issue, we will see that Ethan can summon it at will, so Ethan does have some degree of control over the sigil. He just hasn't really been developing that. Then the conflict ends with Ethan the victor, and he then spares Exeter. And there are 2 things here that I think are super important to take notice of. The first is that Exeter expects to die. This isn't some kind of honorable thing for him. He isn't ready to die because he was defeated. He expects Ethan to kill him because Ethan tried to kill him before. He underestimated Ethan in their first fight, and he nearly died for it. He underestimated him again just now, and Ethan's behavior would indicate that his life is about to end. And in the East, human beings kill members of the lesser races. It's expected. But then we have the second thing, and that's Ethan sparing Exeter. I don't bring this up because I think that Ethan is a saint. He is trying to be a good guy and do the right thing, and his willingness to steal the horses shows that he will do unpleasant things in order to accomplish his ends. Remember, author Ron Mars is keeping Ethan as a very heroic character. But also remember that Exeter was the first person that Ethan thought he killed. It clearly bothered him at the end of issue 3, and then he gets to this town, and Exeter is alive. Sure, Ethan was undoubtedly freaked out and scared of Exeter, but I think that a part of him was also relieved. He didn't want to kill Exeter back then, and he doesn't want to kill him now. Ethan even tells him, I only want to kill Braun. He knows that his anger isn't aimed at bounty hunters, or the Raven Army, or even the Raven Kingdom. It is aimed at Braun, and only Braun. And here is Ethan's original sin standing before him completely undone. How often does that happen? So he spares Exeter. I don't think that he does it just because he likes Exeter or that he's taking the moral high ground, although I'll admit the second one could be possible. I think that Ethan just doesn't want to be a murderer. It's also important to note that Ethan has proven that he can take Exeter in a fight, so there's some degree of pride and maybe an adrenaline high making Ethan feel pretty good right then. Plus, he is now always armed. Let Exeter try again. Ethan can handle him. Skink continues to be both vague and mysterious in this issue, but it kind of comes to a bit of a head. I do want to mention that Skink kind of pokes fun at Ethan's desire to find Ashley again, vaguely teasing him over any feelings that he might have for her. Ethan remains stoic, though, denying that he feels anything more for her than just a vague plan, which is fine because they don't really know each other at all. Skink is the one who remains calm upon seeing Exeter, the one who guesses why he's here, and the one who gathers up mounts for them as the fight is winding down. He stays calm and collected throughout this issue, helping Ethan as best he can. But he also seems to know something. Just before the sigil creates that sword, Skink is watching the fight intently and says that now is the time. He was expecting something from this fight, and after Ethan creates the sword, Skink is smiling proudly. Did he know that Ethan could create an energy sword specifically? Or did he just expect something to happen here? And if so, why would he expect that? The sigil hasn't shown the ability to create anything at all up to this point. It's really only healed Ethan and somehow created an unhealable wound on Braun's face. What else can the sigil do? Who knows? Well, maybe Skink knows. But it doesn't look like he's talking. Whatever Skink does know, he honestly seems more surprised to see Exeter at the dais, so it isn't like he is all-knowing. It is nice to see a bit more personality out of him in general. Skink has remained a background wallflower kind of character for most of this run, and seeing him tease Ethan over maybe liking Ashley is surprisingly cute. It feels more like what you would expect of Ethan growing up next to Skink his whole life and Skink being the older party. You would expect a little bit more of a father-son or maybe like an uncle-son kind of relationship. I hope that Mars brings out more of this camaraderie between the two as we move forward. The pair then arrive at the underground ruins, and the scene plays out nicely. It's nothing special, basically connecting the dots that Mars laid out in issue 8 with Ashley's jewel. The underground clearly has some kind of cloaking field or hologram technology, and I have to admit that I am a bit annoyed that Braun didn't discover this upon his visit. He literally saw Ashley descend those very stairs that lead nowhere. She had to have come from somewhere. And if that kind of technology is possible on Avalon, you would think that Braun would know about it. I can see him failing to investigate Ashley's disappearance, sure. Braun is too hot-headed to think like an investigator, and the killing of his mount probably set his blood to boiling. But I do also think that it is a bit dumb that he didn't send troops to investigate, or anything. Nock was clearly headed along this path. Ashley clearly was repping the underground there. You would think that there would have been some kind of clue. But instead, we have Ethan, who is calm, and he is investigating, and so he stumbles into the underground, quite literally. Which brings me to underground complaint number 2. Why don't you people have a door? Or a wall? Ethan walks into an open-faced building. It is missing a wall here. This is a terribly undefensible position in the face of a mass attack. I'm glad that there was more than one armed response there than poor Nock got, but come on, put up a door and then cover it with your invisibility field, y'all. This is just bad planning. You get a well-armed, well-trained squad of Raven soldiers at this location, and what is going to stop them from just charging in and killing you all? Especially if it's just open. This is a great visual reveal, though, and it is clearly designed to be such, but it is a terrible concept for a secret hideout. I do enjoy seeing the other lesser races represented, as the story thus far hasn't really delved into them or their varieties at all. We have certainly seen a number of different types, but most of them haven't been actual characters, just set pieces. Getting to actually meet some more of them next issue should be fun. I also really enjoy how fast-paced this issue is overall. There is no Lord of the Rings style 6 weeks of walking montage of Ethan and Skink. Nope. We got a boat landing, stole some horses, bam, we're there. I love it. This whole issue is pretty fast-paced, and I really enjoy that we get the whole story with Exeter, and then we cliffhanger our way right into the next issue. The issues that compromise the first arc of Scion are all pretty standalone-y, more like chapters in a book. And issue 8 would have indicated that this second arc would do the same, but then issue 9 shifts everything kind of a half step forward, and I like that. I feel more like I am reading one story that happens to be broken into 7 issues than 7 chapters that make up one story. It is a very subtle shift in storytelling, but I think that it shows that Mars is settling into the pace of this book quite nicely. A quick note before we end. I mentioned before that CrossGen began publishing posts from their message boards in the comics as a way of incentivizing discussion, and they do that again in this issue. And I had a post published. It's nothing major, it's not like I cracked the CrossGen universe wide open, but it is a point of personal pride. This being the end of this particular episode, though, is not a point of personal pride. I had thought that covering CrossGen Chronicles issue 2 wouldn't have had any bad side effects, and it would appear that I am wrong, because I am out of bandwidth for the month. Been a while since this was a problem. This was almost not a problem, though, as this is the last episode of the month, but hey, this episode was nearly double the amount of space that I had left. So clearly, I'm chopping this baby in two so that you fine folks still get an episode, and my hard work isn't for naught. So, next week, Exeter has returned from the dead, and he isn't going to be the only one. But is this visitation real, or is it just a manipulation? Join me next week for Comic Book Breakdown episode 18.7 of Scion, Back from the Dead. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me, to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.